So here's an update on my pellet stove. I've been using it for a couple weeks since I got back from up north and moved back into my trailer. Um, it's good. Pellets are $8 Canadian a bag for a 40-pound bag. I run this normally on number one if it's really not so cold outside, and by cold I mean if it's like -2 Celsius or 0 Celsius. But I run it on two, sometimes three, if it's like -10 Celsius or colder. I also have propane heat and electric, but I have a very big travel trailer that's really long, so it's hard to get heat all the way back there sometimes, which is why I have that fan there pointing that way. But I also use the little heater back there sometimes just to keep the cold out of the back. But it's Comfortbilt. I like it. I think it's the pellets that create a lot of ash, so I try to clean it out at least once a day if it's running all day or overnight, and then I'll clean it out in the morning. It doesn't take long for everything to cool down inside, maybe 30 minutes, and then I just use my shop vac to vacuum it out, and then I can get it going again if I need it. But I try to turn it off when it's warmer during the day and then clean it then. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. So far it's good. It's vented out. It does make a lot of noise when it's venting out the back, and I think that's because the hollow walls in the travel trailer, I mean, they say they're insulated, but honestly I pulled out the insulation and it's garbage. There's not much in there, and what's in there is just not adequate. So I think if it wasn't a tin can, which most travel trailers are, you'd have that, like if it went out a wall, you wouldn't hear that because there'd be the 2x4s and the insulation and the, sheetrock on the inside, and the framing and all the plywood on the outside. So you wouldn't hear it as much. So when it comes on, it sounds like a jet taking off. But then as soon as it's done venting that hot air for maybe a minute or two, it calms down and it's not as loud. And you can hear right now, like, just the fans going, which is fine. I don't mind it. Some people find that they're noisy. I don't find that they're noisy. Maybe you can kind of hear that now. It's kind of making that echoey sound at the back, but it's usually when I turn it up on high, or past 3 or 4, that it starts making, maybe you can hear it. So maybe you heard that, but that does get loud for a minute or two. Sometimes you're like, holy shit, that's loud. But you can't hear it outside. So that's the thing, is that I think it's just reverberating off the tin wall. Yeah, I don't know. I can't explain it, but it doesn't really bother me. It's not there all the time. If it was, it would probably bother me, and I'd probably have to find a fix for it and put a frame maybe around it. But the pipe's going out. But there really literally is like 4 inches of wall that this goes out, whereas in a normal house you'd have 6, 8, 10 inches of wall insulation, sheetrock, blah 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 blah. So but I'm super happy. It heats my trailer. It keeps it warm. I wouldn't say that it's less expensive than propane or electric. Where I am, I pay $1 a pound, and so but it's a wet heat, right? Propane is a wet heat. It's not a dry heat like wood or like electric. So that's the trade-off. But I would say it's 6 to 1, half dozen to another. I mean, this is the smallest model that they have, which is the Alpine 40, I think. And I think the hopper holds like 26 pounds of pellets. And maybe if you're in the US somewhere, pellets are cheaper. I don't know. But here I would say, yeah, it's 6 to 1, half dozen to another. Now, I'll tell you, the one thing I do like about this pellet stove is that last week my regulator on my propane tanks out front started leaking. And so I had to, of course, turn off my propane, and I have no propane heat. And it was like minus, I don't know, I'm going to say like 15 plus a terrible wind, and that's Celsius. And the only heat I would have had without the pellet stove would have been electric. And if you live in an RV, you know that you can only plug in so much before it trips the breaker. You only have, like 30 30 amps. Like, you only have 3,000 watts at a time. So if I had one heater on high, would be 1,500 watts, and another one, if I tried to turn another one on, it would, pop the breaker. So until the new regulator and pigtails came, they came like 4 days later, but it was cold during that time. There's no way the electric heat in here would have like sufficed to keep me warm in this big trailer. I would have had to close off a bunch of it and probably hibernate in my bedroom. So I'm thankful I had it for that. It doesn't use much wattage except during startup and maybe a little bit when the fan's going. So I have a Jackery as well. So in a worst case scenario, if I lost power, I would still be able to run this on the Jackery as long as the Jackery had juice in it. Whereas, and the propane I can run without power. But again, if you're without one heating source, you kind of have to have another one that's adequate. And the heating in here would not, like using a couple electric heaters is not going to suffice. I mean, yes, it would be okay, but it would be cold, than I prefer it, way colder. So anyway, that's my little update. If you have any questions, just ask me in the comments. But I really like it. Like I said, the fan's a little noisy than some people may like, but I just tune it out. It's just background noise for me. I did use that bigger fan a little bit to move the air around, but I just found it moved it around too much, whereas this little one is actually cordless. I have it plugged in right now because I'm near a plug-in. But yeah, it just pushes the air around good. And if I need it to come back to my bedroom area, which is through there, then I would just aim the fan in that direction. So, and right now you can see it is 22.3 degrees Celsius in here and minus 8.5 Celsius outside. Double it and add 30 and then you get your Fahrenheit. Yeah, I mean, these pellets give off more ash than I would prefer. I'd like to run it for a few days without having to clean it out, but it does, running on number 2 for overnight for maybe 12 hours, the ash is quite full in there. So, and that's the pellets, not necessarily the stove. So, but yeah, it's a Comfortbilt and I'm super happy with it. And they shipped it from the US to Canada last March. And then I finally installed it, I think, I don't know, after I didn't need it. So, but I'm sure glad I've had it since I've come back.